Hello there, outliers. Niiamah Shang here, and thank you so much for letting us be a part of your journey here today. I want to just sit back and say we have an incredible conversation set aside for you here as we get to spend time with Leilah Feinstein. Leilah, I am incredibly excited for you to be in space. Thank you for saying yes to this. Thank you for being who you are. I get that you're someone who you really make a stand in the world and you bring that out with you. So just know that as we outliers and trailblazers get to be in space with you, I see you, I recognize you, and I'm grateful for you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you so much for having me. And I love the whole concept and who you're bringing together because outliers and trailblazers are wonderful on their own, but when they come together, they're really powerful.
Yeah, I think that's it. That's something I want to keep exploring. And I think that there's something here around uh we call it outliers edge. And for a while I got stuck in just the outliers, right?
Mhm.
And I missed the edge. I missed the edginess, you know. And the trailblazer part to me comes from what are you gonna do with it? Because I think it's a really wonderful thing that we have going on with being an outlier. And what I get about you is that you've chosen to do something, you know. So why don't we let outliers get a chance to get to know you? Do you mind sharing more about you and the game you're currently playing?
Sure, yeah. So my name is Leilah Feinstein. I am 36 years old. I have been a stripper since I was 25, and at this point in my life, I'm a multidisciplinary sex worker. And in 2020, during quarantine, I started what is now called a stripper's guide, but the name is changing later this year. We can talk about that maybe. But it is a multimedia platform designed to bring sex worker perspectives on relationships, society, and gender to a wider audience. I'm currently in grad school at the Craig Newmark School of Journalism, CUNY in New York. And this year I will be filming a documentary through school that has to do with the work that I do through my Substack and YouTube and not so much Instagram anymore because they shut me down, but because they shut down a lot of sex workers, and my podcast and in-person events and stuff like that.
So this is why is this so important to you to do this work? Because I hear you even when you said Instagram out there, it's like you're still finding other ways just to make sure that your work gets done. You're like, I'm going documentary now, you know? Why is it so important for you to do the work that you do?
So, although my work is focused on sex worker perspectives, on gender relationships in society, the reason that these perspectives are vital for all of us is because these perspectives are essential. My cat is very vocal. She is meowing. These perspectives are essential to issues of gender equity and interrupting gender violence because as long as there is violence and stigma against sex workers, no matter what their gender is, there's always a place for gender violence to go and hide in society.
So tell me here then. Let's start off here. I want to get a chance to just get a bit of your journey, right? And see a bit of this year. What I get about you, Lila, is that uh, it's not about you, which is awesome. And so I wanted to spend a little bit of time just getting a little bit of understanding a bit of your journey, what brought you here, right? And then we'll continue on from there.
Yeah, totally. So you're correct. My work is not about me, especially as a thin, white, cisgender, college educated person who has other employment opportunities available to me if I choose them. One of the most privileged sex workers, probably, in the world, in society, and still face so much exhausting stigma in my life, especially in my relationships. And so I felt personally called to do this because I've experienced it firsthand. But also I've watched so many of my friends and loved ones and community go through abuse in their personal relationships. And these are not just sex workers, but these are femmes and gender marginalized people, femmes, women, gender marginalized people and what really started to gel for me when I became a sex worker. So I went through an abusive relationship when I was 21, pre-sex work, with a cis man. I began sex work at 25. When I was 28, I realized I was queer and I entered into my first queer relationship, which happened to be my second abusive relationship. And what was made clear to me through that experience was that misogyny has no gender And this person kept trying to use my sex worker identity to control and threaten me. And I remember thinking at that time, like, wow, if I were ashamed to be a sex worker, this would work. This would work on me. This would be one of the ways that this person could hurt me. And I've seen so many people around me get hurt by partners, by family members, by friends who have their own biases about sex work. But biases about sex work are really biases about gender. And my experiences of anti-sex worker discrimination have all been linked to gender-related discrimination.
Help make that real for me, because I feel like I am, as you're talking, I'm learning. I told you right before we hit record, I'm like, oh, if you're good with it, I'm gonna be really ignorant, because I think I'm really ignorant, you know. And so like, can you help make that part real for me, where like the tie-in on the gender part in particular?
Absolutely. So in this cis heteronormative patriarchy, which means that we live in a society that has assigned certain characteristics and people as masculine and certain characteristics and people as feminine. And so that is that is a patriarchy. A patriarchy then elevates the masculine over the feminine. And then cis heteronormativity means that we're all kind of presumed straight by default, right? Like when we grow up in this society, most people have the experience of everyone around them assuming that they're straight. And that's why we have this concept of coming out as queer, because it's this, this misconception that queerness deviates from the norm. But the reason that we need that misconception to uphold patriarchy is because if queerness is real, if transness is real, if gender is a spectrum and sexuality is a spectrum, then this system that prioritizes what it sees as masculine over what it sees as feminine and normalizes only heterosexual relationships that are marriage oriented, anybody who falls outside of those categories is going to suffer gender discrimination, and people in those categories suffer gender discrimination as well. But what we do as a society to uphold this system, this violent, oppressive system, which oppresses men, women, queer people, everyone is hurt by patriarchy. I highly recommend to listeners that you read bell hooks for this kind of overarching theory around how masculinity harms men. So what we do to uphold that system is first of all, we've subjugated the feminine, and which means anyone we see as women, we decide are lower than anyone we see as men, and anyone who is gender nonconforming, we also see as lower than men. And to keep femininity in line, we have this good girl, bad girl scale, which you do not have to be a woman or identify as a woman to have this scale, to be subjected to this scale. We have this idealized quote unquote good girl, which in this society equates to cisgender, which just means that your gender matches your gender assigned at birth. Cisgender women who are marriage oriented, who spend their life in service of men, first their fathers and then their husbands, and look at the political climate we're in right now. Look at who is in power. It's this entire team of white supremacist men insisting that people with uteruses are here for breeding. And so that is, that's a good girl. And then it's an impossible standard to achieve, because inevitably you will perform gender in a way that dissatisfies some man around you, and then you're reminded that what happens to bad girls, right? Bad girls are fast, promiscuous, go their own way, outliers, trailblazers, all of these things, and queer. And we really use sex and sexuality to control people's gender performances, we also use things that we see as masculine to control people's gender performances. Ambition, drive, thinking for yourself. All these things are frowned upon if you are a woman or a femme. And the ultimate bad girls in our society are sex workers. These are who society has thrown away, cast away, decided that we are worthless because we are performing services that this like pseudo Christian, I love Christian people, real Christian people, not this whatever this like crazy alt-right stuff we have going on that we've always had going on in Western society, claiming to be Christian. We have this like pseudo Christian relationship to gender that makes sex workers and violence against them the sort of measuring stick, the punishment that we can use to control anybody else. And you're not safe from this if you are, even if you're a cis straight man. The second somebody perceives something you do as feminine, that's a risk to you, depending on who they are, depending on who you are, depending on where you are.
This is thank you for a couple things. One, thank you for taking time just to slow it down and make sure that we're all really with you. I feel you. They're getting me to think again. And one of the things that I appreciate about that is that I grew up. I didn't grow up, but I spent like 10 years in New York City, all right, and worked at a tech company in the middle of Chelsea. And I was like, okay, I'm in. I get things like I'm surrounded. I led different DEI initiatives, and I'm an ally and so on and so forth. And then I left New York and I moved to like Singapore for 4 years, and my world changed. Like I was no longer like immersed in like conversations like this where like this would just be, I don't know. This wasn't the world around me like just didn't like reflect New York, and I became came out of the conversation. So when I say like you're getting me to think, it's actually coming with a lot of like deep gratitude because it's I'm recognizing how much I've given myself like an out to like just not have to like participate in a conversation. And like as we're talking right now, uh something's lighting up inside of me to that wants to move out of ignorance,
I love that.
and chosen ignorance, So like just thanks. It's been a long time, and it's been a long time coming. So just thank you for the way that you show up.
Thank you for your vulnerability and being able to be open and honest when you like don't know something or want to know something, want to know more about something, or like we all do sometimes kind of like step out of conversations that we have the privilege of stepping out of. Like that is really important to normalize being honest about that and to be expected to be received with compassion and with empathy and with grace. So I'm glad that we can, give that example for people.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's it. Like it's an interesting space that I have. So I want to hear a little bit more here. But I think it's an interesting space that I have because I like if we can to just like demonstrate at least one possibility of what this could be. Like I would love to be in it. And I think that's it's an interesting place where I think about like leadership. I'm enjoying your leadership right now. And one of the things I think about is like how do we show up that's actually in alignment with what we believe, right? And I'm getting that right now from you. And I, in a bit, I'm going to go into more of like how you show up as a leader and things like that because I know different outliers like we have there's some questions that are in my mind around like the way that you choose to show up that I want to get to, but I want to stay on on our original topic for now, right? So you talk about like gender inequality, and you said like you look at it through the lens of sex workers, like in particular, and then you brought up the like your relationships, and I recognized that my mind was like I thought I went when you had brought it up, I was thinking work. Like that was my mind went first with it, right? And you brought this in here in terms of how it shows up inside of relationships, and I was like, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. So would you like? This is the fun part here. It's like I'm not necessarily sure what the next question is, but I want to put into this space and I want to go there.
Sure.
You know,
Got
like
it.
let's
Yeah.
play from there. Yeah.
Yeah. So what is coming to my mind to say is I do a lot when I'm dating. So I'm single. I've been in several, committed relationships since I began. When I started dancing, I still thought I was straight and was dating a man, a cis man. And he was the only partner I've ever had who was super supportive. And we never had an issue. My sex work never caused an issue in that relationship, as it should be. And since then, I've had several, committed relationships. I've been single, I've been dating, all those things, whatever. I am constantly, when dating, constantly explaining myself to people.
Mm.
And luckily, I've spent the past 5 years developing theory and framework around how to talk to your partner as a sex worker. What kinds of, I've talked to hundreds of people in my community. I survey people in my community. I have my whole social life is inside my community. I've gathered stories from hundreds of people, the same story over and over again, and the same relationship bumps that they're hitting. No matter what their gender is, no matter what their partner's gender is, they are running up against misogyny and anti-sex worker discrimination in all of their relationships, as I still do. And I want to get that out there for any of my people who are listening to this. I think sometimes because people know that I talk about sex work and relationships, they think that I have it all figured out or I having an easy time or whatever. But anti-sex worker stigma is so deeply ingrained in our society. This idea that these are bad throwaway women. We're not all women, but that's the stigma. That we are incapable of fidelity, that sex work and fidelity can't coexist, which is also, there's an extra layer of it for people like me who I'm just not into cis men. I never say never, but like I'm queer in a way that like it's probably not going to happen with a cis man for me. But that's my clients, and I'm not, attracted to or interested in my clients beyond a client relationship. Then there's also this stigma that all we care about is money, whatever. Like, this is capitalism. We all need a job. And those of us who are in the service industry, which I am, like, the only way to enjoy your job is to like enjoy the clients who are nice. And I'm glad that I have clients that I, get along with and whatever, and we have a positive business relationship. But there's just all of these sort of small-minded ideas about sex workers, and I constantly bump up against jealousy with the people that I'm dating, which is fine with me for it to arise, because jealousy in relationships is an opportunity for intimacy. That's an opportunity for conversation. That's an opportunity to get to know each other. But what I find, and what I find in my research when I work with others, when I study other sex workers' experiences, is that what is really not happening in a patriarchy for sex workers, but for any femmes and women, is partners who are unable to step into our perspective. And what I hear over and over again from sex workers, from femme sex workers especially, and femme, if anybody listening doesn't know, is a queer person who sees themselves as feminine and expresses themselves in ways that they feel and others recognize as feminine. So I identify as a queer femme. That unless we are partnered with other femmes, especially other femme sex workers, we are constantly being misunderstood. And that is not to say that there aren't men or non-binary people or masculine of center lesbians who can't do the work or don't do the work to support us. Not at all. But it is, unfortunately, misogyny is ingrained in all of us, and it's far too common. And a lot of sex workers and femmes and women bump up against this same problem inside of relationships that are either abusive, toxic, or with somebody who is just emotionally closed off. Because like a lot of my partners and potential partners, jealousy could be interrupted if they did the internal work to look at what was actually making them jealous and confront those things inside of themselves, talk to me about it, all that. But also be able to step into my frame of mind and understand that those of us in society who present as femme are constantly in our places of work, especially if we're sex workers, performing femininity that may look exactly like our authentic expression of femininity, but that doesn't mean that our business hat isn't on when we're doing it at work.
So there's a part here as I'm hearing this of like, um, one, just like being like the understanding and the perspective that's coming
Yes.
along with it, understanding the
Yeah.
perspective here. And so there's a couple of things here. So Lila, like I recognize I recognize I'm really grateful, right? And I also recognize that like I've asked you to do work here today, right? We like because I had stepped out for a while, I hadn't done my work, you know? And so part of this year like is you're spending the time in the education. I recognize that like it could be an easier conversation if you could just talk it out, right?
No, this is literally like my favorite thing to talk about.
Okay. All right. So good. Okay, cool. That feels good because I recognize that. All right. So now I want to like shift a bit. So like we're talking directly now about like the work that you do, and now I want to see like the leader behind the work that you do. Right. Before we make that shift, is there anything else that you want to put in the space specifically like with the work that you do? And then I'm going to try and like just be like, so how did you like out of like they're out of everyone else out there, like say, like I'm gonna like actually step in, and I'm gonna take it, I'm gonna make this a real thing for me. So yeah, would you? Is there anything else you want to say on this before we move on?
I just want to drive home the point that the stigma that sex workers experience is almost always stigma attached to feminization. And that is
Yeah,
why every single person listening has a stake in this. We
yeah,
all have a stake in subverting patriarchy and having these conversations inside of our relationship because we all have a responsibility to end what the UN has declared a global pandemic, which is femicide, which is the chronic daily murder of women and feminized people.
yeah. So I realize here, like as we have this conversation, I want to go to topics and conversations about like leadership, which like it's more familiar for me, right? So like I'm just gonna keep calling myself in throughout this entire conversation. There's be just be like, just so you know, I know what's happening, and or at least I know some part of what's happening. But at the same time, I want to look at this like I don't want to lose this component around like the gender inequality, right? Because I think there's it's one of the things that's running through for you, right? And so I think the first thing, like I'm thinking about any outlier that's out here, right? And the views that they may have about like whether they can show up as a leader, right? Their cause, the thing that they care about may not be gender inequality through the lens of sex worker, you know? But like they have something like these are the people that come onto into my space, right? I'm curious for you, like when did you know it's like time for you to say like to say something, like to not just be a part of it, but to like actually lead or be a voice? Like I'm very curious about that.
It's funny, I kind of had a feeling you would ask me this because I've listened to some of your
I'm gonna,
podcasts.
I'm gonna ask. Yeah, yeah.
And I, for me, there was not a moment. I am autistic and
Mhm.
I am very, very tied to my convictions. And to me, it does not make sense for me to make any decisions or participate in any relationships where I am not able to show up with my values. And of course, I didn't have words for that when I was like a kid. I didn't even know I was autistic till I was an adult. But I've never been the type to care what other people think. And I don't mean that in like I'm not trying to like gas myself up, or I mean that very literally. It does not occur to care to me what other people think unless I love you and I respect you and like you're telling me that I'm messing up. And then I really care, like, because I care about, showing up for my people and myself in integrity. But I the other thing about feminized children is that we are put into a box by everyone around us as either a good girl or a bad girl. And I was put into that bad girl box from childhood, which I was always fine with. And it gave me a lot more, people expected me to be rebellious, and it gave me a lot more room to be rebellious. Didn't come without its consequences and its stigma and, all of the unfair ways that adults sexualized me and put me in that position. But it did, and I have I have parents who were, I will just say, unhelpfully permissive. And so, like, some of us struggle because we had really strict parents. Some of us struggle because, like, I like to say I was raised by wolves. But
Mhm.
so I kind of, you know, did whatever I wanted and when I wanted. And with time and with maturity, that I think, and with life experience and with realizing really early on after my first abusive relationship when I was 21, I really felt this calling inside of myself like, I want to stop this. This is crazy. What just happened to me was crazy. And it has felt more than anything like, it doesn't feel like it's of me. It feels like it's through me. This feels like my calling, my mission. And I just happen to come like pre-programmed with the like not give a bleep button. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear on your
You can
podcast.
do, it's an interesting place. Like in my space, I always say like the point of this is to show outliers, but it's like to show up as yourself and how you can leverage that to like keep creating your change out in the world, your impact out in the world. So be you as it is, like we could. Um yeah, so okay, so what I'm hearing, it's an interesting thing because like some people say like you like don't care what other people like think about you. Like I'm already not caring. Like that already started out with it. And with that then like you're also like I'm also hearing like you're tied like you know that there's a larger mission that's at that place, and there was just one thing that was just like a little bit less of a roadblock than others to like to get into the game, and then you just keep playing the game.
I also I think there's an element of this that is really important to just for me to name, which I already did earlier, which is my privilege inside of the sex industry. Like I am not by any means suggesting that like every sex worker has to be out of the closet to be liberated. Like you have to be able to be telling people what you do. No, like this world is super dangerous for us. And I'm still like I went through this whole thing in my first semester of grad school just last fall. It was the first time I was meeting a bunch of new people outside of my usual communities, which are like queer people and sex workers and nightlife. I'm a musician. I'm like in clubs where I feel very, it's not that weird for me to be like, hey, I'm a stripper. But suddenly I was in journalism school and all of my work revolves around being a sex worker. And I had to sit there in the first, week and a half of classes, introducing myself to a bunch of strangers, telling disclosing to rooms full of people that I'm a sex worker. That was a whole thing that I did not expect mental health wise. Because it's really scary to tell people that you're a sex worker, even if you're in the practice of doing it all the time. And so I'm not advocating for the idea that like every sex worker should, be public about what you do. But I do think that like my work would not be possible, it would not be as impactful as it is if I were not able to publicly disclose that I'm a sex worker.
Yeah, no, like it's not lost on me, Lila, as we talk here that um like I was talking about like your leadership. It's not lost on me. I'm like, oh wow, even for myself, like I've been able to say the word sex worker like 4 or 5 times, and like as you talk, it's just like you swim in it, you know. And I'm like, oh, this is really like it's really quite like it's interesting, it's fascinating, and there's a real part of it that like I wanted to make sure that I just like keep floating up to the top as we have this conversation because I'm like, oh, like it can like there are things out there that can be really easeful. And I know that I've like challenged myself and like I'm thinking about this through like some of the frameworks and paradigms that you brought in. I'm like, I've challenged myself to push myself and do all these other things. I'm like, it's like so easy to be like, oh, I pulled an all-nighter. I don't do any of that anymore. But like I
Good.
and like but there were places where I could find like I found myself as we're having this conversation thinking about the things that I have like been holding dear that like I pride myself in, around courage and vulnerability and my form of leadership. And then I was also noticing I'm like, oh, I'm not like in real time, I'm like, oh, I wonder how I'm navigating this conversation right now. And I'm like how am I a part of what you're talking about? In which ways am I like is am I playing a role in gender inequality without even like really recognizing it, right? And there's like, and there's some element here where it's like, yeah, I'm gonna do my thing. I'm gonna mess up along the way, and I'm gonna get better along the way here. But it's been really lovely. And I feel as I say that, I feel like I'm like at your expense, but like I get like this, like you're like you're down for these kinds of conversations. You're down for these kinds of things. But it's been really lovely just to be in space around that and continue to play out. Like it's interesting, Lila. Like I kind of want to have the same conversation I would normally have around things, and like because I don't want to miss you as a leader. You know what I'm saying? And miss you in like the space of what we like where we normally be. But I'm also like, if I'm just being real, like this is it. Like this is what we listen for. We listen for like how we continue to grow and continue to expand and such. And um yeah, so I just want to like bring that into our space here and just like navigate and jump with it. Like, yeah, I think that like that actually feels real. I'm like, I might just call you back again and see if you're down to just do like another conversation and we'll spend more time focus on like the leadership part of it all. But I'm like, this
Anytime.
is yeah, like I think the thing right now that's coming up is like it like we can talk about from a high level perspective what it's like to have to be courageous to go talk about this and go speak this out and disclose this out into a room of people. um but I think there's something different when it's like when it's happening in real time, and being like and how do you navigate it? So let's do this here. um as you've gone through this year, what right now is giving you sweaty palms? What are the things that the projects that you're taking on, the places that you're like looking ahead to, the changes that you're trying to see? What's getting you just both a bit scared and super excited at the same time?
So it's actually the thing that you were just talking about, which is like being in so far. I mean, I've been disclosing on the internet that I'm a sex worker for the whole time I've been a sex worker, pretty much. But I'm not, I don't have some massive platform. The people who I'm interacting with on the internet are mostly like people from my community. I'm not getting a lot of hate online. I know that will change if or when my platform takes off in that kind of way, in the internet space kind of way. But this is the first, 2024 was the first year that I actually started bringing my work like very far outside of sex worker spaces, which has always been the goal. But like stepping into CUNY, stepping into grad school, and now suddenly, you know, polishing myself professionally in a way that is intimidating because I'm career changing basically. I'm going from sex work to journalism and I'm in the place of transition right now, but I'm like, learning new skills. Also, like as an autistic person, learning new social environments is really challenging for me. And my professional world has been strip clubs. Like you act really different in a strip club than you act in grad school. And I mean, it's all still me, but the social rules are different. And I know the social rules of the strip club and nightlife world. And that is where I can be my most unfiltered self. And so, like, learning to polish and stop swearing and, what kind of conversations are appropriate in professional settings that are not sex work settings is all stuff that I'm learning. And I'm 36. I have like a lot, like, there's people who are like 26 in the program who have like, their LinkedIn is popping, and I'm just like here, like in my own whatever. So, as I think about the things that are coming my way in 2025 that I'm so excited for, like I am so, so excited to be able to co-run this symposium at CUNY about, maybe we weren't recording yet when I talked about that, but I'm co-running in April. I'll be co-running with another colleague of mine in my cohort who is also a professor in a different CUNY setting, a symposium on sex worker and gender safety and abolitionist solutions to gender violence and discrimination, and I'm so excited for that. I applied for a TEDx talk. We'll see, but I know in 2025 I will. And your podcast. This is the first time I'm on somebody's podcast who is pretty much the first time somebody who is not in like the sex worker world or the queer world explicitly, and so that all definitely makes my palms sweaty and my brain sweaty, but I'm like, okay, I didn't do these 5 years of work for nothing. Like, we're here. This is what we've been aiming for.
Yeah, I really appreciate this. I really appreciate this because one of the things that I like to do is like to see like to peel back here and say like, all right, we see how someone shows up on the outside because we're listening to the conversation and we're watching them in the conversation. We rarely get to know what's happening on the inside, right? And this is like it's fascinating to me in the sense of like you're like you're stepping out of you're expanding your world right now, or like you're expanding the world in which you're showing up, and as you're
Yeah.
doing it you're also shifting the identity, and it's like in there when so it's like I'm at least you're shifting your career, right? I thought when you said that, I thought that was like I really grasped that, right? It's like there are definitely levels in which we like continue to play, and it's making me I appreciate being able to see it. You know, I appreciate being able to see it. I appreciate being able to play with it. I like it's fun for me because I'm like, oh, like we're both stepping into like different worlds here, you know? And one of the
I
things I
love
like about
that.
podcasts, yeah, like it's cool. One of the things I like about like podcasts is that like it's a timestamp, you know? Like I'm like, all right, I can't wait to come back. We're 5 years down the line. And each of us taking both of what we stand for out to more and more people and more spaces and grown from there. And I want to talk to you outliers as you're listening to this here. One, I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful for you listening to this conversation because on my end, I got to play. It's actually quite easy for me in these podcasts. Like I can just like ask a question and have other people answer it, you know? And other times I get to like sit back and ask, but like I feel like in this space, like I rarely get a chance to actually be seen. Right. I'm transparent, but I really get a chance to actually be seen. And I think that's like as we're having this conversation, I'm like, oh, there's ways I can go that could be really safe and I don't have to say anything at all. Or I can be in this space and be like, oh, I'm like this is what I'm feeling right now. This is what I'm recognizing and see how we can navigate that there. So Lila, I want to say thank you to you on multiple levels. Thank you for the work that you do, right? Thank you for the conversation that you had. Thank you for your grace. We even like started the conversation like late today, and like your grace was like right there with it. Um, Thank you for expanding me on a very selfish level. I'm like, oh, I just feel really like something has ignited in me that has not like that didn't know was dormant, and so I'm really grateful for that. We're going to wrap up our conversation here, and I'm going to do two things. One, I'm going to ask you outliers. um, we have this initiative we call the one person one conversation at a time initiative, and we'd love for you to go share this on your socials. Please like let people know about this conversation. Like there's something that's happening here as we're bridging worlds, and I would really love for you to be a part of that in a meaningful way, whichever way you can. And then on top of that there, we have the one person one conversation at a time initiative really sits down and says, who's one person in your life right now who would really benefit from hearing this conversation? I have this sense inside of me that like we can get to exposure in one way, but we get to impact through this. Right. And so I ask that you help us play on both sides of this journey as we go through. So that's my invitation. If you're able to do that, it would mean the absolute world to me. And I thank you, outliers. So, Lila, we're going to wrap up our conversation here. The way that I wrap up the conversations are twofold. One, if any outlier wants to go deeper down the journey with you, what's the best contact? What's the best path for them to do? What's your best contact info? Mhm.
Yeah, so my platform is called A Stripper's Guide, but the name will be changing in 2025. So you can find me right now. This is late January, maybe early February that the podcast coming out. Currently, You can find a Stripper's Guide podcast wherever you stream. You can find my Substack under the name A Stripper's Guide. You can find my Instagram. I have a new one after they destroyed my old one, Meta. My current Instagram for my business is asg.headquarters because Instagram does not like the word stripper. And but if the name has changed, if you go look for me, you can't find me. If the name has changed, just go find my regular Instagram, Leilah Feinstein, LeilahFeinstein, and everything will be linked from there. If you ever need to email me, my transitional email while all of this is taking place is contact.leilah@gmail.com. I love hearing from people, so please reach out.
I love that there. And then, Lila, we'll wrap up this conversation with like we put outliers to the side here. What's an insight or takeaway that you have that you're taking from this conversation? And if you don't have one, that's totally fine too. But I do like to look at it here and say, like, for you, like, what has been something that you got out of this conversation?
You are reminding me that the real value and the real goal of my work is conversations. It is for you, like you said you were being selfish to have these sort of like insights into yourself during this conversation. I don't think that's selfish at all because when we can look inside of ourselves and look inside of our belief systems and what we're maybe taking for granted or taking at face value and not thinking critically about what was maybe fed to us by larger societal systems that are based in supremacy and oppression, then we can't do the work that it takes to bring that anti-oppressive abolitionist mentality and framework into our personal relationships. And if we can't bring it into our personal relationships, we can't bring it into our communities. So that's where it starts. So thanks for that. This is a really awesome soft landing for me into like the non-sex worker podcast world.
I appreciate you showing up the way you do, and yeah, I'm excited for everything that comes out from here. Lila, I deeply appreciative. Outliers know this year. Until the next time we talk, go out there and be you on purpose. Journey on.